Hello and welcome to Spotlight with Sandhya. Our guest today is a member of parliament and a former cabinet minister. He's in the news almost every day, but today the focus is going to be on Jairam Ramesh, the author. His latest book, The Light of Asia, is an unusual one as its focus is on a poem. Welcome to the show, Jairam Ramesh.
Good evening, Sandhya. Delighted to be with you.
You're a Rajya Sabha member from Karnataka and you do have roots here. So, Kannada Bharata nimge?
Channag Bharat. I was born many decades ago in Chikmagalur.
Okay.
My mother still lives there. My cousin lives there. I studied, 2 years in Chikmagalur when I was a kid.
And of course, I think the pull of coffee will always be there, right? Whichever part of the world a Kannadiga is.
Although, surprisingly, I'm more of a tea drinker. I developed a fondness for coffee, over a period of time. It's an acquired taste.
All right. Jairam, you do many things and you do them all well. You're an engineer, you became a policy expert, you're an economist, and you got into politics and you became a cabinet minister. And along the way, you were a newspaper columnist and you anchored television programs, which is when I first got to know you. And in the last few years, not counting your day job of holding up the grand old party, you've churned out a book a year. Now, I want to know from the horse's mouth, is it true what Abid Hussain said about you? That Jairam has the highest IQ of anyone I've ever met and he has the energy of 10 horses. Did he say that?
No. That was Mr. Abid Hussain, one of my early bosses, one of my mentors and one of my favorite people who wrote, forward to a report which I contributed to. No, that's not the truth. The fact is that, till 2014, I hardly had any time to write books. I'd written 2 books. One was an anthology of all my articles that had appeared in India Today. And the other one was also an anthology of my newspaper articles that had appeared in the Telegraph. But after 2014, thanks to Mr. Modi, in this, the fact that, we were forced to sit in the opposition the last 7 years. So I have actually, this is my 8th book, The Light of Asia, the poem that defined the Buddha, is the 8th book in 7 years. And I have to thank Mr. Modi for awakening the author and the writer in me, because I've had extraordinary amounts of time for research, for going to archives, for doing a lot of research, and then writing this book, which I didn't have, unfortunately, before 2014. However much I wanted to write, just couldn't find the time. So I'm hoping that my book writing phase will end in 2024.
Fingers crossed then.
Well, I'm giving my fingers crossed, certainly.
You initially wrote, books about policy issues on India's economic liberalization, its relationships with China. What inspired you to get started on becoming a biographer?
Well, I've written 3 biographies. One biography was an environmental biography of Indira Gandhi. The other one was a biography of P.N. Huxer, who was, one of India, perhaps the most influential civil servant India has ever produced. And he was Indira Gandhi's alter ego, an ideological compass. And the third biography, of course, I wrote was on the colorful and the multifaceted V.K. Krishna Menon. So these were 3 political biographies of public figures that I have written. And the reason I wrote those biographies was I was interested in them, number one. Number 2, they had made major contributions. They were major personalities in their own right in Indian public life. And thirdly, and perhaps most importantly, Sandhya, they left behind a large amounts of archival material, contemporary written material in archives both in India and abroad. So these 3 biographies are not judgmental biographies. They are narrative biographies. They are biographies that are based on archival evidence. They're not based on oral history or interviews with people. They're based on archival evidence, on availability of papers in the public domain. I didn't have any special access, by the way. These are all, papers that are available to any historian, any scholar in archives, both in India and abroad, provided you have the time and the inclination to do the research. So the availability of archival material became a very key factor. Now, for example, I would love to do a biography of Mr. Kamaraj, one of the greatest chief ministers India has ever produced. And when I talk to some of my friends in Chennai, scholars of Tamil politics, they said, good luck if you can find anything written by Kamaraj, which would form the basis of a biography. The only thing that he would write on files is a signature. So, I've been deterred from doing a biography of Mr. Kamaraj. The availability of archival material was key to the choice of the three subjects that I had in my political biographies. I've written a book on the 1991 economic reforms,
Right.
but I was involved in that. I was a participant. Again, I had a lot of. This was not based on my memory, but it was based on all archival material that I had in my possession, which I had kept, my own papers. I wrote a book on the bifurcation of Andhra Pradesh, which again something that I was involved in. Again, based on written material, a book on the making of the land acquisition law of 2013 when I was rural development minister, and a book on environment, which is really a record of the 26 months that I was minister for environment between 2009 to 2011. So my books are quasi academic in a way. They're based on research, heavily footnoted, heavily referenced,
Right.
and I don't. I try to keep a distance from the books that I write. Because the idea of writing a book is not to project oneself, but to project the subject. Of what you're writing.
But how do you keep bias away? I think that would be quite a challenge, isn't it? Not to bring in your views or looking at the subjects through your personal lens. How do you filter it out?
Well, in the case of the political biographies, it's very difficult. You have to be dispassionate.
Right.
You have to be objective. There are many things about Indira Gandhi that I admired, many things that I didn't like. I mean, for example, in the emergency was indefensible. It was a colossal error of judgment on her part, and that I have to face up to it. Similarly with Mr. Huxer, and certainly with Mr. Krishna Menon, who was a very colorful and a very effervescent character, and he was an eminently, there's much in him to admire. But he was also an eminently dislikable man, and so, as a biographer, what is the role of a biographer? And for me, unfortunately, most biographies end up either demonizing people or valorizing them. You either have a hagiography or you have a demonography. And I was determined to avoid the extremes, and that my job as a biographer is to put the information of the biography, the person whose story I'm telling, to put all the information in the public domain, and let the reader make up her mind or his mind about what is. So it's not judgmental. It's not to demonize somebody. It's not to valorize somebody, but it's a narrative. Based on a written record. So I have to keep a distance. I have to be objective. And as a biographer, and particularly as an archival biographer, there is a tendency to discard the material which you think may be embarrassing for the person whose book you're writing. But then, I decided that intellectual honesty, whatever scrap of paper I find, must find its way in the biography. For example, let me give you an example of the problems I faced. There's one letter in 1939. I think it is in October 1939, December 1939, which Nehru writes to Krishna Menon. This is in my Krishna Menon book. And Nehru and Krishna Menon had hundreds of letters. The person other than Indira Gandhi to whom Nehru wrote the maximum was to Krishna Menon. They were very close. They were soulmates for almost 25 years. So in 1939, late 1939, early 1940, Nehru writes to Krishna Menon saying, I'm physically exhausted. I am mentally very, very disturbed. I'm having some sort of a breakdown, an emotional breakdown. I'll come out of it. But these are difficult times. These are very tough days, and I just want to share with you, my
Right.
the trauma that I'm going through. I found that an unusual letter. The Nehru is writing to Krishna Menon, who is in London, and for a couple of weeks, I kept that letter with me, saying that does it make sense to include that letter in the Krishna Menon biography? I said, well, I would be dishonest if I didn't include this letter. But then the question is, why did Nehru write this? Why did Nehru tell Krishna Menon in 1939, 1940 that not only is he physically exhausted, but mentally and emotionally very disturbed and drained by news that he had received? And then, after doing research and after doing some thinking, it struck me that the reason why Nehru wrote to Krishna Menon was because he disapproved of Indira Gandhi's marriage to Firoz Gandhi.
Oh.
For almost a year, there was considerable uncertainty. For a number of reasons. Firoz Gandhi was a Parsi. Nehru came from a Orthodox Brahminical family. I mean, he was not Orthodox, but his family was Orthodox. And So I think he was opposed to the marriage, and that comes out in most biographies of Nehru and Indira Gandhi. Now, the question was, should I say this in the book or not? And I said, look, I'm not writing this book as a congressman. I'm writing this book as somebody who wants who's bringing out a personality of a man who's made major contributions to Indian political history. So I included it. So some of my friends in the Congress party were not happy. I mean, one or two people said, why did you include it? What does it mean? Similarly, on my biography of Indira Gandhi, although the biography is only on her environmental record, it's an environmental biography. How can you write on Indira Gandhi without drawing attention to the emergency, for example, or the issue of forced sterilizations, between 1975 and 77? So there again, I faced a choice. Should I, shouldn't I? But I did, and so these are some choices that biographers make. I did not in any of the three biographies use any oral material. I didn't use any anecdotes, or I didn't use he said this and this was what was said, because Indians, we are great. We are great at fiction. We are great at inventing facts. We are great at redrawing history, so to speak. We are not a written culture, as you know.
Right.
Ramayana, the Mahabharata, these were all oral. We have a long 3,000 year, 4,000 year oral tradition. Written traditions are not very strong in India. So that decision that to write a biography based only on contemporary written sources is a rule that I have scrupulously followed.
Why do you think these stories are relevant to the present? These political biographies. What impact do
Well,
they have now?
these are people, Indira Gandhi, Krishna Menon, Nehru, P.N. Huxer. These are all people who have made major contributions. Now you can argue about them. I mean, you can argue that Nehru made wrong decisions when it came to say Kashmir or China, the economy, or Krishna Menon took disastrous decisions as defense minister, which cost us horribly in 1962. we can argue on that, but these are controversial personalities, but they are also very consequential personalities. So I think the fact that they are consequential, that the fact that they played such decisive roles in Indian political history, make them subjects for biography. They're not boring people, they're charismatic in their own right. They're charismatic, they are colorful, they are consequential, and they're also controversial. So I think that's what makes a story.
So will you be writing about Rajiv Gandhi's political alter ego or Sonia Gandhi's?
Oh, I think Rajiv Gandhi is too recent,
Okay.
and I was too closely involved with that period. So yeah, I mean, there's a biography of Nehru, which I am, working on, which I have been working on for quite some time, off and on. And my friend Ram Guha keeps prodding me, from time to time to complete that biography. So maybe I'll get around to doing that. I'm also right now working on a biography of an Indian scientist, Obaid Siddiqui, who was responsible for setting up the National Center for Biological Sciences in Bangalore. And earlier, he had set up the molecular biology unit at the Tata Institute of Fundamental Research in Bombay. I mean, he's in one of the foundational figures of Indian molecular biology. And through the life of Ubaid Siddiqui, I am revisiting the process of institution building in science in Nehruvian India in the 50s and 60s. So that's a biography I'm working on right now.
You are a quintessential outsider to politics. You had no family political connections, from what I gather, but you became very successful, and you've been part of, the huge transformation that India's body politic and economy has gone through, and you've been responsible for quite a few of those changes yourself. So when can we expect your autobiography?
Never, never.
Why is that?
Autobiography. No. Autobiography. I mean, they're self-serving. They're really self-serving, and I don't like somehow this whole memoir writing is something that I'm not. Frankly, I can't put myself at the level of a Huxer or Indira Gandhi or Menon or Nehru. Fine. I've had opportunities, and but I'm realistic enough, and there are many things that I can't speak, I can't say. I mean, certain things should remain with oneself. One can't be brutally honest all the time. It has its limits. So no, I'm not going to write an autobiography. Certainly, that's for sure. But yes, I mean, I didn't come from a political background. I don't have political. One could say that I have a degree, but I don't have pedigree. I don't. I don't have. I don't come from a political family. But I have been extraordinarily lucky. I got good breaks. I worked in the government. Got became a member of parliament. Became a union minister. And I've had I've had good opportunities of working with people. I worked with Mr. Sam Pitroda very closely. And then when I joined the Congress Party, I became, sort of an office bearer in the Congress Party, got exposed to Mrs. Sonia Gandhi, Dr. Manmohan Singh and others, Mr. Pranab Mukherjee and others. And, I got many opportunities. So, yeah, I mean, I was lucky. I mean, I was lucky. I didn't come from a political family. I didn't have a political background, but I hung in there, I just hung in there. And see, you've got to have resilience in politics. The trouble with most professionals in politics, including some of my very good friends, the trouble with professionals is they all want to join at the top. They all want to join, to become ministers, or to hold office. I joined the Congress Party when I became an office bearer in the Congress Party. We were out of power, and for 6 years, I mean, I was an office bearer in a party that people had written off. They said Congress Party is never going to come back to power. India is shining, right? Remember those years of
Right.
Mr. Vajpayee, Mr. Advani. So politics, you got to have resilience. Often described it as 80% down and 20% up. You got to have the resilience to withstand the shocks. I mean, for example, I've been out of power for the last, I mean, we've been out of power, not I, the party has been out of power for the last 7 years. And I've used that time. I'm still very active in the Congress party. I'm a member of parliament, chairman of, a standing committee. I speak on behalf of the Congress party occasionally, spokesman of the party. But at the same time, I've developed a parallel track, of keeping myself intellectually busy, intellectually, always challenged by writing these books.
So we can talk about your latest book now. It's very fascinating. I don't think there's ever been a person who's written the biography of
Here
a
it is.
book. Yes,
Here
and
it is.
I want to.
Yeah, this is an unusual book, Sandhya, because it's not a biography of a person. Fundamentally, it in essence is a biography of a book. It's a biography of a poem, and through the poem, I also tell this biography of the author of the poem, because you can't divorce, the poem from the author. So it's not so much a biography of, when you say biography, it means of a person, right?
Right.
But the central figure in this book is this poem, The Light of Asia, which was published in 1879, which was on the life of the Buddha. And it's a biography of that poem. It's a literary biography, a cultural biography, political biography, social biography. But I could not avoid telling the story of the poem, of the author,
Right.
of the poet. So it's a two in one. It's a biography of a poem, and it's also a biography of a poet. So it's an unusual book, and it's something that The Light of Asia is a poem that I read when I must have been 15 years old when I first read it. Yeah, I must have been 15 when I probably must have read this book first in Chikmagalur library. I used to go to the public library very, very, very frequently when I used to spend 3 to 4 months of my childhood when I was in school in Chikmagalur with my grandparents. So I'm pretty sure I must have read it. I owned a copy at home, but I'm pretty sure I read it when I was 15, 15 or 16 in Chikmagalur Public Library. Krishna Rajendra Public Library.
Okay.
So it's a poem that's sort of, it defined who the Buddha was, it defined the life of the Buddha, and it became extraordinarily influential in England, in America, in Europe, in India. It had literary impacts, it had social impacts, it had political impacts. It India's first silent film was called The Light of Asia, made in 1925 by Himanshu Rai and Sita Devi. And that was based on The Light of Asia. So I was intrigued, when I was very, very intrigued. And also the fact that, The Light of Asia was a very important book in the life of Nehru.
Mhm.
Very, very important. Nehru was a great admirer. Uh, if at all he was a bhakt, he was a Buddha bhakt. You
Okay.
know, he was not a Buddhist, but he was a great, like every Indian, sort of Buddha is hardwired into all of us. And for Gandhi, perhaps the book that remained with Gandhi all his life is the English translation of the Bhagavad Gita, which was called the Song Celestial, which was by Edwin Arnold, who wrote The Light of Asia. So both for Gandhi and Nehru, Edwin Arnold is a very important figure. He's a very important figure for Vivekananda, a very important figure for Tagore, C V Raman, great name in Bangalore, Raman Research Institute. C V Raman is one of the three books that influenced C V Raman the most when he was a young man. One of the books was Euclid's Geometry, and the other one was Arnold's Light of Asia.
Right.
Uh, so this book it's that way. It's an unusual book. I mean, I enjoyed writing it. Uh, it was COVID. It was lockdown. Difficult days, difficult months. My archival access was all done digitally. And I had archives in the US, archives in UK, archives, of course, in India, um, archives in Germany, you know. And amazing, you won't believe it, Sandhya. I got all the archival material digitally. I
Fantastic.
got it. It's amazing, but you've just have to spend time, just and energy uh, to track down people. Oh, by the way, I got some material from Australia,
Oh.
a lot of material from Sri Lanka, a lot of material from Thailand.
Are you a Buddhist yourself?
No, no, I'm not a Buddhist. In fact, I explain at the end of the book that I am not a Buddhist. I'm not I'm not a follower of Buddhism, but every Indian has the DNA of every Indian. Buddha is present. Buddha is part of our life. There's something remarkable about the Buddha, the way Buddha looks, the life of the Buddha, the humanity of the Buddha, not the divinity of Buddha, but the humanity of Buddha, the compassion, the tolerance, But yes, I mean, if there's one figure that I'm profoundly influenced by, like many Indians, it would be Buddha. I've said in the book that the Buddha became the Buddha by not following a Buddha, and that's what Buddha's message is, right? The light is within you. Become your own guide, become your own mentor. Search within you, search for yourself. So Buddha didn't follow any formula. He didn't follow any guru. He didn't follow any great theological school. Buddha is that way very unique character. And what Edwin Arnold does in this poem, The Light of Asia, is he defined the life of the Buddha. The poem was not on Buddhism. The poem was not on Buddhist philosophy or Buddhist religion. It was on the personality of Prince Siddhartha, who later on becomes
Hmm.
Buddha. And that's why it had such a great impact, by dealing not with the divinity of Buddha, but by dealing with the humanity of Buddha. I think what Arnold did, and remember, this poem was published at a time when science was blossoming.
Mhm.
There was a lot of questioning of organized Christianity, and Buddha was seen to be this Christ-like figure, pre-Christ, Christ-like figure, in terms of personality. You and that's why I think the poem had such a great impact. It got translated into 13 European languages. It got translated into 7 or 8 Asian languages, and it got translated into 11 or 12 Indian languages. Malayalam, Telugu, Tamil, Kannada, Hindi, Assamese, Odia, Marathi, Gujarati, Punjabi, Sindhi. You name the language, and you'll have the translation of the Light of Asia. And it became, Sandhya, in the 1910s and the 1920s, it became inspiration for a number of social reformers in India, particularly in Kerala and Tamil Nadu. Sri Narayana Guru, who founded the SNDP, and then there were E.O.T. Das and Lakshmi Narasu in what was then Madras. The light of Asia, what they took out of the poem, what they took out of the life of the Buddha was his rejection of the caste system.
Right.
And that's why this also became a very important text for Ambedkar. And Ambedkar, there's a photograph in the book about Ambedkar's private library.
Hmm.
And in that, there are 2 copies of The Light of Asia. And then I discussed this with a scholar of Dr. Ambedkar, and he said, "Sir, you're wrong. He didn't have 2 copies, he had 3 copies. Unfortunately, I couldn't get a photo of the third copy, but I certainly got a copy, a photograph of the 2 copies. Very nice photograph. And so, therefore, these people took the message of caste equality, the rejection of the caste system, and of Brahminical practices of that time. So, the Light of Asia was more than just a poem. It became a defining text for social reformers. It became a way of educated Indians to feel proud of the Buddha, which is part of the Indian civilizational legacy. Remember, this poem came out at a time when we were still in British rule. This was a colonial production, so to speak. So anything that put India and Indians in good light, although technically speaking, Prince Siddhartha was born in what is now Nepal. And the Nepalese don't like India saying that, Buddha was born in India. Technically,
Yeah, but
Buddha
it
is.
was India, so it's all right.
Yeah, I mean, Siddhartha was born in the Indian subcontinent. But don't tell that to any of your friends in Nepal because, they are very possessive about the fact that Siddhartha was born in what is now geographically. So it's a fascinating poem. Edwin Arnold was a fascinating figure. As I said, he translated the Bhagavad Gita, which became Gandhi's favorite book. He translated the Hitopadesha. He translated the Gita Govinda. He translated the Mahabharata. In the late 19th century, one of the great popularizers of Indian literature and Indian cultural, legacies was Sir Edwin Arnold. He was on the one side a Victorian imperialist, a believer in British rule in India. On the other side, he spent all his time translating ancient Sanskrit books into English, Not only Sanskrit, later on he ended up translating Persian, Turkish, Arabic, Japanese, but his abiding love was Sanskrit literature. If you look at it from today's perspective, he was a colonial figure. He was a figure who believed in the British Empire. He was a person who believed in Britain's destiny to bring modernity to countries like India. But at the same time, he was acutely conscious and aware of India's rich cultural legacy.
Since you've been writing these, historical biographies, what is your opinion about what is known as cancel culture now? And for example, you talked about the author of this poem, right? So he's an imperialist, he was a colonialist. Should we, according to cancel culture, then we should be rejecting him just because we reject the colonialism and the imperialism?
No, I see what you're meaning. No, these are part of history, Sandhya. I mean, I would have been happier if there was a Curzon Road in India. I lived for 3 years on a road which is every three-wheeler person would always refer to as Curzon Road, but it had been renamed Kasturba Gandhi Marg. But Curzon is very much a figure of Indian history. So I mean, I'm somewhat ambivalent on this. I am not one for that. I mean, by the way, I've mentioned it in the book that Bangalore is one of the few places in the world, one of the very few places in India, which still has a statue of Queen Victoria.
Right.
Bangalore has still a statue still standing, in a prominent place. And thank God for that, So I differ with my friend Shashi Tharoor, Shashi has taken the view that British rule was all darkness for India. I don't subscribe to that view. I think that there was imperialism, there was colonialism, but in a very curious way, the British made us aware of our own past. We had forgotten about the Buddha, we had forgotten about Ashoka, and we rediscovered ourselves.
Which is what struck me.
So I'm not a great believer in renaming roads, bringing down statues, No, it's difficult because there are some people who are awful figures, no doubt about it, there are some awful figures. But I suppose this is the process of rewriting history. I mean, there's a photograph in this book about Cecil Rhodes. And Cecil Rhodes is very much in the news nowadays in England because there's a movement to remove his statue in front of Oriel College in Oxford.
Right.
I mean, I'm ambivalent on it. I mean, so what? You can't erase his name out. You can only erasing a statue. By removing Queen Victoria's statue in Bangalore, is Bangalore benefiting by it? No. Can you just airbrush Queen Victoria away? She's very much part of our history. So
Right.
I'd rather we confront it. I'd rather we face it. We look at the positive sides, we look at the negative sides, and along with British rule came a large number of scholars, and these scholars did not have a political agenda. I mean, Edwin Arnold, for example, I would say his political agenda was not, it's okay. He believed in British rule, but to say that he rediscovered the Buddha, to say that he translated the Bhagavad Gita to perpetuate British rule in India, I think it boggles the imagination. So, to that extent, I part company with my very good friend Shashi Tharoor and others.
Okay. All right.
I hope people who see your program get to read the book because it's an interesting book. It's a book about a phase of Indian history, political history, cultural history, of India becoming sensitive and aware of its own rich and glorious past. There are many mythological figures. I mean, I make a distinction between Lord Rama and Buddha. Buddha is a historical figure. Lord Rama is a mythological figure. I mean, we worship Lord Rama. My name is Jairam. So I was born on Ram Navami, so that's why my grandmother named me Jairam. And Ram is very much part of our lives, but Ram is a mythological figure, to be venerated, to be respected, to be admired, to be followed. But Buddha is a historical figure, and is the most fascinating historical figure, And I think Arnold brought that out beautifully. And I hope I have done justice to this extraordinary poem, which is still very much active across the world.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for your
Thank
time, Jairam Ramesh.
Thank you, Sandhya.
Until I'm back next week with another interesting guest, take care and bye-bye.
Do subscribe to the Raintree Media channel on YouTube. Like, comment and share the videos.